Well, hello, IED students in engineering. We're going to learn today how to create a three-dimensional solid in a cloud version CAD system called Onshape. Now, when you get into the actual lab here, we will be using Fusion 360, but until then, we're going to allow you to use the free Onshape version of CAD, computer-aided design, to actually get familiar with the commands that you'll have to use. So this is really great that you can practice this at home, and it's going to make a nice smooth transition when we get to the Fusion here in the lab. So if you want to create a new document or a new shape or a new solid, it's all called a document in Onshape. You're going to come up here under Create. You're going to choose Create Document. We're going to give this document a name, and this is actually going to be Lesson 108 IED. And you need to name it with something with your name in it. I'll just put my last name, okay? You might want to put your last name, maybe first initial, in case someone else has your last name. So you want to identify this file as yours in case when you share it with me, I know whose file I'm actually getting. So click OK. You'll notice that name of that file shows up in the upper left here. And you're shown a drawing area that has three work planes. You have the front, the top, and the right side. And if you recall when we did the isometric drawings, you had the same three planes that you represented in the isometric, right? So what we're going to, it really doesn't matter which of these three planes you start your drawing on, but the concept is in CAD, you start with a two-dimensional sketch like a rectangle, and then you extrude it into a 3D solid like a cube, okay, or a prism. So we're going to start with one of these planes. Now, typically, we're going to start with the front plane, but it's not really necessary. As you get into this, you can choose other planes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to, and this is called the browser, very important part of your CAD system, to keep up with your browser so you can see what's happening and what order it's happening in. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn off the top view by clicking on the eyeball here. And we're going to turn off the right side view by clicking on the eyeball here. And that only leaves my front plane to work with. Makes it a little cleaner. So what I want to do is I want to click on Sketch. And I want to click on this plane that I want to sketch on. And you notice it adds another plane around that. And really remember, these planes are infinite. They go off forever and ever. But they show up as rectangles. So my sketch plane is on my front plane, but it's kind of tilted at a weird angle. So here's a great little shortcut key, and you're going to see a lot of shortcut keys in CAD systems that you'll learn over time to make things easier. All you do in this one is hit the N on the keyboard, the letter N, and that makes it normal to the surface. In engineering, if we're looking perpendicular to the surface, it's called normal, thus the letter N. So now you're looking straight at the front view. We're going to start out with sketching a rectangle. So notice your menu bar has changed when you're in the sketch mode. So you've got a line tool, a rectangle, a circle, an arc, and a polygon. We're going to start with the rectangle. And I'm going to simply draw a rectangle here by clicking and dragging. I'm going to draw a rectangle. Now, you can just leave the default sizes, or you can make exact numbers. Generally in engineering, we want things to be exact dimensions. So let's say I want a 3-inch in length. Notice this dimension here has a box around it, meaning you can edit it. So I'm going to just type a 3 on the keyboard and hit enter. And it actually makes that a fixed 3 inches. Over here, now the box is around this number. So I'm going to type in a 2 and enter and make that a 2-inch box. So now I have a rectangle that's 3 by 2. Not really necessary that it be centered on the plane. I have a 3 by 2 block, exact dimensions, right? So now that I'm done drawing my sketch, my 2D sketch is complete, it's dimensioned. I'm going to come up here and click on the green check box. Now, the rectangle is showing up still in the front plane, but we're just looking straight on it. So before we actually extrude it into a solid, we need to turn it so we can watch the solid take place. So we're going to come over here to this little box here. It's called the view cube. If you click on this arrow, and the very first option is called isometric. We're going to click on isometric, and you remember when you were drawing your isometrics, The front plane would go back at a 30-degree angle like you see here. And so really we're looking at the front plane of a cube, and the rectangle is resting upon that plane, right? So the next step is to make this rectangle become a solid prism. So I'm going to click on the first command to the right of sketch. It's called extrude. These are always done in pairs, sketch and then extrude. I'm going to click on extrude. I'm going to click on the rectangle that I actually want to extrude. And notice a rectangular prism just sort of pops out of the page. The default depth is 1 inch, so it's actually going to jump out 1 inch. You can grab the arrow and you can pull it wider or deeper. You can take the arrow and you can push it back. Again, different sizes. Now, if you want exact dimensions, the blue number is highlighted here. So let's make our extrusion 2.25 and then hit enter. And what that will do, it will make this extrusion exactly 2.25 in depth. So right now, my my cube or my rectangular prism is 2 inches high, 3 inches wide, and 2.25 inches deep, if you remember the terminology we used earlier. Well, at this, I'm going to click the check mark because I'm done with my extrusion. Now, at this point, since I have my extrusion drawn, I don't really need the plane anymore. It sort of just gets in the way. So I'm going to come over here to the front view, and I'm going to turn the plane off by clicking on the eyeball. If you ever want the plane to come back, you just click on the eyeball again, and it comes back, right? So we're going to turn the plane off. And then if you want to move this around on the screen, if you have a mouse with a wheel, if you roll the wheel up and down, it zooms in and out. If you hold down on the mouse wheel, you are able to move it around. It's called panning. And then if you actually click, this is cool, if you click on the right mouse button, you're allowed to rotate it around, or it's called an orbit tool. So you're allowed to orbit this thing around in all different orientations. Now, we want to make sure we're back to where we started from. So I'm going to click on over here on the view cube again. I'm going to click on isometric. And that'll pop it right in the view there, so it's full screen and you see the front, the top, and the right side. Just like you drew on your paper earlier, we now have a completed rectangular prism. But normally in our drawing of CAD items, they're not just simple shapes. We have to add other shapes to the existing model. So we're going to add another sketch. We're going to click up here on sketch, sketch 2. And I want that sketch to be on the top plane up here. So it says select the sketch plane. I'm going to click on the top plane. And notice now it has a sketch plane number 2 on the top. But again, it's sort of tilted at a weird angle. So what do I do to look at it straight on? I hit the N button on the keyboard, normal. And now I'm looking straight down on top of the plane here. This time, instead of using a rectangle, I want to use a circle. So I'm going to click on circle, and I'm going to click where I want the center of my circle, and then I'm going to pull back, and it'll actually create the circle as I pull back, and I click. Now, I want this circle to be exactly 1 inch, so I'm going to click on 1 and enter. And it makes that circle exactly 1 inch. Now, this little symbol next to it here, that's a 0 with a line through it, is actually the symbol for diameter. So this is diameter of 1 inch, okay? Now, anytime you draw a circle on a shape, you need to locate the center of that circle properly. And so what we need to do is, before we leave the sketch, we need to make sure I want this circle centered in the rectangle. So I'm going to come up here to the dimension tool, and I'm going to click on the center of the circle, and I'm going to click on the top edge, and I'm going to pull over to the side here, and notice I can adjust the dimension between the arrowheads. We want to be somewhere near the middle. And I'm going to click once. Now notice this dimension turns blue. So this allows me to edit that dimension and actually move that point. Well, for that point to be halfway between 2.5 on the depth, I need to be 1.25. I'm sorry, halfway, our depth was 2.25, so halfway would be 1.125. I'm going to hit enter. And what that does is that makes the vertical dimension of the circle be located right in the center of the rectangle. I need a second dimension in the other direction in order to make sure this circle is centered. So I'm going to click on the center. I'm going to click on the side, and I'm going to pull down here, center it in the middle, click. And in order to be halfway or centered on a 3-inch width, I need to be 1.5. Notice the circle sort of hops over a little bit. So now that I've set my dimensions, the center of the circle is in the exact center of the rectangle. And this is actually the easiest way to do it, is to draw your circle first and then locate it from two edges to get the center point. Now that I'm done with my sketch, I'm going to click on the green check mark. Again, I can't really see it if I were to extrude it, so I'm going to come over here and click on the view cube and choose isometric. And now I'm back in my isometric view. You can see the circle sketch on top. Now remember, every sketch needs to be extruded in a 3D model, so I'm going to go extrude it. I'm going to click on the circle that I want to extrude. And right now it is defaulted. Onshape assumes you want to add material every time that you do an extrusion. But this time we're going to actually remove material. So I'm going to click on remove. And notice what happens when I click on remove. It actually goes down into the shape. Not all the way through, because if you recall, the height of our cube was 2 inches. We only went down 1 inch. It defaults to 1 inch. If I want this to be a through hole, not a blind hole, we want it to go all the way through, I come up here next to blind, and I click on the edit end type, and I come down to the bottom and I choose through all. And then so then what happens is this hole now extends all the way through the part, and now I can click on, always finish your extrusion, finish your sketches and finish your extrusions by clicking on the green check mark. Now, to verify that that hole is all the way through, I'm going to do my right mouse button again, and I'm going to click and orbit over so you can see indeed that hole goes all the way through the part. So everything turned out the way I expected, right? I'm going to go back to the isometric view. So we're back. One more thing we want to do, and then this will be turn you loose to do some free sketching and extruding. We want to add a rounded edge on the top. There is a fillet tool and there is a chamfer tool. I'll let you figure out the difference in those two. We're going to start with fillet. Now the default fillet is 0.2. I'm going to make it 1/4 of an inch, so I'm going to make it 0.25. And I'm going to click on each of the top edges here to make this edge rounded 0.25. I click here. I click here. And you notice that rounds those sides, and then I'm going to click on the long side here and the long side here. And there we go. We've got a rounded, this is called a fillet all the way around. And so now I'm going to click on the green check mark to finish the fillet. And voila, I have my very first three-dimensional solid created in Onshape. So I hope this gives you a great chance to go and play with Onshape and try some of these buttons up here and see what you guys are able to create. Happy drawing.